Hello and welcome back. I am Mr. Sesotris. It is Monday, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. My work schedule is such that every other week I don't have as much time to focus on making like longer and more complicated videos, and so I wanted to do just a bunch of like short videos that can be enjoyed like on your lunch break or whatever, on those off weeks when I'm not as free to kind of do the videos that I want to do. So what I want to do is this week I wanted to do just a brief intro to one specific novel. And I'll do more of these in the future with different classics to kind of get you an introduction to a classic work, let you know if you'd maybe want to read it or if you'd be interested in it, and just kind of dig into it. And so this week I'm going to be looking at Ulysses by James Joyce. So this was published in 1922. It was serialized in part before that, but it was published fully in 1922. James Joyce is an Irish author. It's a modernist novel. It's experimental. It's weird. It's also kind of big. And this is one that I see a lot of people are they hear about it and they're like, oh, is that, is it related to Greek mythology? Like, what's the deal here? And the answer is that it is related to Greek mythology, but in kind of a roundabout way. The sections of the book are linked to sections from Homer's Odyssey. There are no chapter headings or anything though. I actually had to go through and handwrite in what the sections are, because they're, you're just supposed to kind of figure it out. And Joyce scholars have indeed pieced together what each section kind of is, and I think Joyce has mentioned in his letters and whatnot kind of what each section relates to. So if you're ever confused, you can go to Wikipedia and it'll tell you what the titles of the different sections are, so you too can mark up your copy so you know kind of what is going on. But it's not about Greek mythology. It's kind of about everything. It's set in kind of a day in the life of a bunch of different characters, most notably Stephen Dedalus, who also appears in A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man by the same author, Leopold Bloom, and then his wife Molly. And it's just and it's very basic, simplest level. It's just day in the life of these people in Dublin in, I think 1920 something. But it's so much more than that. This book is very much about everything. Each section is a slightly different genre. There's some parts that are experimental stream of consciousness stuff. There's some parts that are stage plays. There's other parts that are pretty lucid and they just read anything, like a 19th century, novel. And it's pretty clear, but they're filled with literary allusions, and also historical allusions. There's a whole bunch of stuff about the historical relationship between Ireland and Great Britain informs so much of this, but it's not really explicit. It's kind of baked into the fabric of it. Just like if you're if you were living in Ireland at this time, it was just kind of a part of the culture. It was, everyone is kind of aware of how Great Britain treated the Irish people, and it's just part of the architecture at this point. But so this book is very strange. It can be a little frustrating to read if you don't know kind of what's going on. The best way to read this is either read it in a class or a book club or something where you can get some kind of guidance as to sort of what's going on and have someone point out sort of the cultural and literary allusions that you might not get at first. I would say if you can get an annotated copy that has footnotes, that would help a lot. If you could get, I don't know if they even make these, but they probably would, some kind of concordance to go along with it, or a reader's guide that would kind of give you a roadmap as to kind of what is going on in terms of the allusions to other literary works and, you know, cultural history and all that kind of stuff. But it is still worth reading. I dunk on Ulysses a lot because I think it's very, like, over the top in terms of how complicated it is. Like, you really can't just read this. Like, you can pick up Jane Eyre and you can just read it, and even if you don't know a whole lot about like 19th century culture or anything, you can read it and enjoy it and understand the plot. This one is not really concerned with like plot. It's very much about painting a picture of what the world was like in Ireland at this time, and it's everything. It's the literary backdrop and it's the historical backdrop, and it's kind of bewildering and nuts. I will say there is a Scottish octopus that shows up at one point who represents the end of the world. I won't tell you where that shows up, but, you know, just so you know. But so with Ulysses, I would say if you want to read it just to enjoy what Joyce does with language, because he tears it apart and moves it around and really plays with it, you can read this without a lot of context and just unhook your brain and just flow along with what he does with words and language. And if you just read it at that level, you can read it and kind of get something out of it. It'll be strange and you won't know what's going on or who's doing what. But if you just want to read it to enjoy kind of the language, feel free, go ahead. If you want to get into kind of what Joyce is doing, and no one even knows for sure what Joyce is fully doing, but you can read this in a classroom setting, or read it and then read like scholarship on it. I'm sure there's videos on YouTube of people analyzing Ulysses. Read articles about it. Ulysses is kind of like a big, giant, huge painting with a ton of stuff going on, and scholars who study it usually focus on like one small part, and they look at this, or they look at two sections and see how they're related. If anyone tells you that they just, you know, picked this up off the shelf, read the whole thing start to finish, didn't have any context, and understood it perfectly, then that person is lying to you, or they're just trying to show off, because no one just knows intrinsically everything there is to know in order to make this fully kind of make sense. And scholars can't even agree what Joyce was going for. So this is a experimental, strange, weird novel, and it's huge and it's bizarre, but I say it's worth reading at least once, if only just to understand kind of what modernism is. Because if you want to know, you know, this and T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland are kind of two things. If you read those, it'll kind of show you what modernism was and what people were doing and what they were trying to accomplish. It's strange and it's weird and it's bewildering, but it's worth reading if you're interested in like experimental novels and kind of one of the greatest novels written in the English language of all time. I don't know if I read it and I can't tell you about the plot in any way except that it's just a day in the life. And there's a cat here. Yes. But it's interesting to read and it's interesting to study, and this is definitely one that like you kind of live in this book for a while and you read articles on it and you read analyses of it, and then you come out the other end a little bit more confused, but maybe your brain is enriched in some way. So that is Ulysses by James Joyce. If you're interested, give it a go. I would say proceed with caution, and if you can read this in a group or in a classroom, definitely do that, because you will get more out of it, I promise. With that said, I'll see you next week. Bye.